Aliens Explored is a podcast exploring famous and obscure cases of UFO sightings, alien abductions and other strange events from both a believing and a sceptical perspective whilst keeping an open mind. I'm Stu Jackson, a professional actor and amateur ufologist with a particular interest in the crop circle phenomenon. I'll be debating that otherworldly visitations are real. The truth is out there.
And I'm Neil Kelly. I'm a professional actor as well and used to work for the military as an intelligence analyst. I'll be arguing from a more doubtful point of view. I mean, it's all a bit far-fetched, isn't it? Perhaps the best documented case of an alien abduction was that of Travis Walton. In 1975, the 21-year-old logger disappeared after a bright beam from an overhead craft launched him into the air. But what was even more astonishing was the sheer ferocity with which the local authorities tried to discredit the witnesses and debunk the whole story. Join us on Aliens Explored as we unravel the mystery of Travis Walton.
Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of Aliens Explored, your weekly look at otherworldly visitations, UAPs, UFOs, and ETs, and all manner of strange goings on. I'm one of your hosts, Stu Jackson.
And I'm your other host, Neil Kelly.
And I'm excited about this week's episode, Neil.
You have been for quite some time, haven't you?
I have, ever since our last episode. I've been gearing up to talk about this, but before we do, it's worth mentioning our competition, isn't it?
Let's do that, yes.
So, tell people about our competition.
Yes, as listeners may recall, those of you who listen to our live stream, we decided to have a competition. If you see the artwork on our t-shirts, was a picture of Stu and myself, and in between us a little the classic grey alien. The artwork was, who was the artwork created by again?
Simon Brumat, known as Cy Monstrous Art. If you go onto Twitter and search Cy Monstrous Art.
Cy Monstrous Art. Very, very good art, very good likeness, and it's a competition to win a t-shirt with this logo on, and all you have to do is come up with a name for the little grey alien who's stood between us, looking either confused or bemused, or depending on your perspective, or just pissed off. So far we've had 11 entries.
That's at the time of recording.
At the time of recording, yeah. So
there's some brilliant ones in there. So
it's still wide open. So if you come up with a brilliant idea, then let us know.
Yep, you can email us at aliensexplored@gmail.com with your names.
And we decided the deadline for entries was it the 23rd?
25th.
25th.
No, 23rd is today. Well, it's not today as we're recording it, but it's today as this goes out. So you've got just 2 days left
two more days
us.
to enter, and then we will announce the winners during our live stream.
We haven't told people about the live stream yet.
Oh right, well we will announce the winners in a special show soon afterwards. The winner. Well, there's going to be one winner.
There will be one winner, but you do get to win a t-shirt, an Aliens Explored exclusive t-shirt, and there are only 4 of these in existence at the moment.
And I'm wearing one right now.
And I've got another one in my drawer, and 2 of them are winging their way as we speak to the US of A. Yes, let's mention as well the live stream. So next week is the 30th of July. That's the Friday. That's the day that our episodes come out. But on the 31st of July 2020, that was the day that this podcast launched. So we will be running a live stream on the 31st of July 2021, in case you're listening in the future. This is going to be at 4 p.m. UK time. I believe that's 10 a.m. Central time. You can check for wherever you are in the world from that. over on the Twitch channel. That's twitch.tv/stooge_action. You can find a link to it in the description with this podcast or on our social medias. We're going to be doing a retrospective, so looking back at all our previous episodes and seeing if we've changed our minds about things or
dug our heels in even further.
Dug our heels in even more. I know which is the more likely with me. Open-minded person that I am. So do come along and join us, and you'll be able to join in with the chat through the Twitch chat on that, twitch.tv/stooge_action. Same as the last live stream, if you were there for that. So very, very exciting. But that's not what we're here to talk about today, is it, Neil?
Well, it's kind of on the list of things to talk about, but the main thing we're here to talk about, the thing that our listeners have tuned in for.
You're not supposed to tell them about the list. This is supposed to be off the cuff. I mean, it is unscripted. We can definitely.
There isn't an actual list. Only in my head.
It's obvious this is unscripted. Fantastic. But today we're talking about probably what is the single most well documented alien abduction case in history, that of Travis Walton. Now, had you heard of Travis Walton before starting this?
No, I hadn't. And I watched the movie. I mean, there are a couple of movies have been made about him. There's Fire in the Sky.
Yes, that's the fictional based on a true story.
Fiction based, but there's also a documentary which in the UK is free to watch on Amazon Prime, and it's called Travis: The True Story of Travis Walton, and that will give you pretty much the full story. But so, in a nutshell. In 1975, 21-year-old Travis Walton, who was working on a logging team in Arizona, they were on their way home from work, and they saw this light coming through the trees. Apparently, this is it the largest pine forest in the world? I think it says something in the movie. It stretches for miles and miles and miles. And,
it's the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest. But I don't know if it's the largest or not.
I think they mentioned something in the movie about it being the largest pine forest in the world. These gentlemen lived in a town called Snowflake in Arizona, and they were on their way back there after a hard day's work when they saw this light in the trees. They got out to investigate, Travis taking the lead, and he was, before their very bewildered eyes, was beamed up into.
I'm gonna just in the interest of clarity here. He was not beamed up before their very eyes. He was hit by a light from this UFO in front of them and knocked to the ground. They then drove off.
In a panic, they left him.
In a panic.
Well, I would, wouldn't you? I mean, if I saw you knocked down by a beam from a UFO, I'd be.
Oh, I'd be shitting myself.
I'd be gone, mate.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll come back later to find your smouldering remains.
That's exactly what they thought was going to happen. His best friend did in fact go back, expecting to see Travis's body there, but didn't.
Well, there was also. I mean, watching the movie, The True Story of Travis Walton, I thought, there's all this stuff about the UFO abduction, which is a tale that I think all listeners to this podcast are familiar with. But what really struck me was what this is really about is the extent to which the people of Snowflake, Arizona, and the authorities did not want to believe this. So initially, all his friends were murder suspects. Yes. They came back saying, they were young men, they were loggers. They didn't have the presence of mind to just say, we've been working out there in the world's biggest pine forest and our friend has gone missing. they went back and said something like, he was hit by a beam of light from a UFO, and the authorities believed probably a more commonplace and prosaic explanation was that there'd been am I using the word prosaic right there? I thought it sounded right, but anyway.
Yeah, sounds right to me.
Yes, that more likely, the more common explanation was there'd been some kind of falling out, there'd been a fight, and Travis Walton had been murdered and disposed of. So they were
some of them had criminal records, so it was easy for them to jump to that conclusion. I think one of them, Alan Dallas, I believe, had what we would term GBH over here, or actual injury with a weapon, or
there was something bodily like harm in the UK, isn't it?
Yeah, he had a violent criminal record. So yeah, it was easy to believe that. Certainly easier than some UFO coming and hitting him with a light and then disappearing with him. Yeah,
you can see why they would.
Absolutely,
because I mean, law enforcement does what law enforcement does, doesn't it? And the old adage, to a man with a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. Well, yeah, we're law enforcement. We arrest people for murder. We don't deal with alien abductions. That's what this looks like.
I mean, it doesn't help as well that Snowflake, a very small community, it was a Mormon, well, I believe it still is, a strong Mormon town, so very, very religious community. And yeah, fitting the idea of a UFO or aliens into that kind of thinking is not easy at all.
Well, that would intensify in a later part of the story, because they went out to look for Travis. They didn't find him.
Hundreds of people with sniffer dogs.
They didn't find him.
No.
But then he reappeared.
5 days later.
5 days later, staggered into town, a bit confused, disoriented. He apparently thought.
I'm just gonna sorry to interject, but I'm just gonna clarify again. He didn't stagger back into town. He was found after. So again, his best friend received a phone call from phone box from an adjacent town, and it was Travis saying where he was and help me, and he went out to pick him up. And he was suffering from what we would now call PTSD. Of course, they didn't have that term back then.
Was it PTSD or was it just
I think it's very obvious.
He was just a bit confused in the way that you are when you've just been woken from a dream and you're not quite sure where you are.
When they reached out to sort of help him, to touch him, he backed away. He was in absolute terror. He was showing very dangerous. I mean, for months afterwards, he was showing dangerous levels of stress. As someone who suffered, fortunately, mildly from PTSD, absolutely, he was suffering from PTSD.
Right. Also, he appeared to be under the impression that it was still the same day.
Yes.
He didn't realise that 5 days had passed, and his friend said to him, "Feel your face," and he felt his face and felt that he had 5 days worth of beard stubble.
5 days, beard growth, and he'd lost 10 pounds as well, and was dehydrated, and well, he only had about 2 hours worth of memories. So it's understandable why he might think it's the same day. But absolutely traumatic. But I mean, at this point, but before that phone call and his return came in, the town were about to lynch that group,
believing them guilty of murder. But then the next stage of the story was, okay, he's still alive. You didn't murder him. Something's happened to him that we can't explain. And when they tried to tell the UFO story, I think this is, and for me, this is what the story was about: how resistant they were to accepting that possibly could have happened. And these people's lives were made a misery. One of them I know moved away and created a new identity for himself in a town where he wasn't known, just because they would be pointed out in the street. They were harassed all the time.
Most of them moved away from Snowflake specifically, and there's actually only Travis and his brother. Now, his brother wasn't on the logging team, but he's obviously got caught up in all this. There's only Travis and his brother that actually stayed in Snowflake, but they all stuck to their stories vehemently throughout. Now, it's probably a good idea to mention the polygraph tests.
Yes, a test which they're always insisting it's not a lie detector. In fact, even in the movie, someone said it's not what people think. It's not a lie detector, and then in the very next interview clip, someone calls it a lie detector because that's what it is in popular fiction. It's the kind of thing that the men from Uncle will be subjected to in the 1960s, or Simon Temple or whatever. They along with truth serum, they would be subjected to a lie detector. This weird device that could tell if you were lying, which apparently it's not. But it's not regarded as. It's kind of regarded as pseudoscience everywhere outside the United States, or certainly in Europe anyway.
People have been convicted for murder and executed on the testimony of it in America, so I know they take it very seriously. Here we don't. Here, court of public opinion does, because you've got this. We have a daytime show, or had a daytime show. I don't even know if it's still going, called Jeremy Kyle.
Didn't someone on the show commit suicide or something? And
that wouldn't surprise me. I'm not aware of it.
That was the end of it. Yeah, he basically brings vulnerable people onto the show, gives them a really hard time, confronts them with whoever else was involved in their story, and just grills them from a very very conservative moral standpoint.
Yes,
and unsurprisingly, people have a very hard time.
Yes, but he would use a polygraph test in that usually to confirm whether or not somebody's had an affair, allegedly. And but he would bring deliberately people without much self-restraint, put them in a very stressful situation, get right up in their face shouting at them, and then when they react to that, which is understandable,
his ratings go up. Yeah.
Look how violent you are. It's got so little time for that arse. Anyway, so in the 5 days while Travis was missing, the team undertook a polygraph test. Of the 5 of them, only one was inconclusive, and that was Alan Dallas, who basically ruined the test. And he did it deliberately because he didn't want to do it. So, rather than giving yes/no answers, he would give convoluted answers. He showed us having very, very high stress levels, which basically spoiled the test. Everyone else, the other 4, all came through absolutely as they're telling the truth when they told this story about the UFO, the beam of light, when they denied that anyone had attacked Travis. They all came through as being truthful or believing what they were saying. And in fact, there was a quote from the guy who invented the polygraph test, who said that one person, yes, can sort of beat the test, or it can give a false reading. The chances of all of them beat it's 1,000,000 to 1. It's not going to happen. Then when Travis comes back, they undertake more polygraph tests. Alan Dallas subsequently, by the way, passes the polygraph test on subsequent. They've had loads of these polygraph tests over the years. Every single time it comes out, they're telling the truth. But one of the guys, though, the loggers, his mother still doesn't believe him.
No,
to this day.
I think with a polygraph test, and I think one of the reasons why, in Europe it's relegated to sensational TV, daytime TV. is that it's very, very prone to confirmation bias. If someone gives the right answer and you like that answer, then he passed the polygraph test. If it's not the answer you're expecting, and it beats the polygraph test, then people just say, well, we don't believe it. They believe it if they'll accept the polygraph test result if it gives them the result they want. Otherwise, they won't. It's
easier to fail a polygraph test if you're telling the truth, though, because it measures stress effectively. I mean, it's more complicated than that, but on a basic level, it measures stress. So it's easier to be under stress and give an honest answer and it gives a false reading than it is to basically be lying and it give a positive reading. That's much harder. And for 6 people, I mean 7 if you include Travis's brother, who's also undergone these polygraph tests, for 7 people to consistently, time after time after time after time, come up with positives, it's just it couldn't be done. It couldn't be faked.
I tell you who else uses a kind of polygraph test or something very similar is the Church of Scientology.
Oh, they're e-meters.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
It's very much there. You sit there in a chair holding a couple of tin cans, I think.
I think they measure resistance effectively, don't they?
And is it still sort of printing out on the sort of wide fanfold computer paper, and it's still
theirs is just on a swaying dial, that's like a semicircle.
But even when I see the FBI subjecting someone to a polygraph test in the 21st century, it still looks like a 1960s polygraph with a fanfold computer paper and a pen sort of drawing the lines and someone carefully, diligently marking it, saying, oh yes, they showed stress there. And
usually when they're marking, they are marking the time that the person gave the answer, so they're not marking whether it's stress or not. They're just marking that's the point at which they answered this particular question. But it's like, I mean, when you see it in movies, it's not like when you see people doing CPR in movies, and you see them bending their elbows. Well, no, CPR, you're actually crushing a person's chest. When I was taught CPR, I was taught basically, if you're not breaking a person's ribs, you're not doing it right. You should be basically going down about 2 or 3 inches because you're supposed to be squashing the heart. And you see people like in the movies on there, they do like a couple of light presses and the person splutters and comes back. No, the idea is you keep the blood pumping to the brain for long enough for the ambulance to get there. It's not to revive someone. You're just keeping the brain alive until they can be resuscitated. Movies take a big pinch of salt with those.
But I think if it's not on the record already that I do not set much store by polygraph results.
Okay, and that's fair enough. I would agree if it was a one-off, isolated, they did it once, or one person did it and it passed. I would absolutely be right there with you. But the consistent results over and over again from a group.
I mean, I'm interested in that, but for a different reason than you. I mean, you're concerned with yes, they consistently got the same results. What interests me more is that they were subjected to this time and time and time again from a community that seemed desperate to not believe this story, to be able to disprove it. That for me, that's the significance of all these polygraph tests, and they would employ these, what we regard over here as pseudo-scientific methods to desperately try and prove that UFOs are not a real thing. It shakes their faith in their fundamental beliefs, in Christian beliefs that we are God's finest creation and unique.
Well, it's not just the Christian belief. There's a whole big thing out there about, and this comes to the much wider, are UFOs real thing one way or another, and it being made public that they are. It's been said, I think it was Stanton Friedman who famously said it, that if we suddenly discovered that that aliens were real, we wouldn't start thinking of ourselves as British and American or French or German or Australian or we wouldn't we'd think of ourselves as humans. Now, the people in power around the world are only in power because we think of ourselves as, well, we're Britain, and then there's America, and they might be our allies or they might be our friends, and we need someone to take charge and deal with them, and we keeping ourselves insular keeps these people in power. If we suddenly stopped thinking that way, if we suddenly just started thinking of ourselves as humans, which it would then be humans and aliens if the tribe got worldwide, then all these people would lose their power.
Or not just
and money.
As humans, but maybe as earthlings, along with every other species, from elephants to bacteria. We are from planet Earth.
Totally. But the ultimate thing is the people in power would lose some of that power. And they can't afford for that to happen, of course.
Well, I mean, have you heard about the theory of the great? You must have heard of the theory of the great filter.
The Great Filter. I'm not familiar with that name.
It's why when you look up in the skies, why you don't see UFOs, and there are two ways of looking at this. One is that this Great Filter effectively says that no civilization could reach the stage where it can develop the technology to travel between the galaxies, because they would have destroyed themselves, as we are destroying ourselves with our use of fossil fuels and burning up the planet with disastrous catastrophic climatic change. We will destroy ourselves long before we develop that kind of technology. The other way of looking at it is that if these aliens, if a species from another planet had lasted long enough to develop that technology, it would mean that they had gone beyond a stage of fighting wars and destroying their environment, that they'd actually learned to live in harmony with each other and with their planet to develop this technology, which would mean that if they came to us, it wouldn't be, I think we kind of judge them by our own standards, and they say that they just wipe us out or enslave us, because that's what we would do. But they've actually developed beyond that. That's what I would prefer to believe. But we talked some time ago about the Robertson Panel, and this was an operation just after the Second World War, when America wanted to test new technologies, especially aircraft, and they with Operation Paperclip, they got Nazi scientists on board, brought all the Nazi technology over for their aircraft and rockets, and they started putting out stories about UFOs, allegedly, to cover up their, if anyone happened to spot one of their experimental aircraft in the sky, that they've heard these UFO stories. And then when people start talking about UFOs, they would just be debunked as mental. Often end up in either ridiculed or even end up in a lunatic asylum. That was the Robertson Panel got together to do that, and they employed professional debunkers. There was a guy called Donald Menzel, who was an astronomer from Harvard University. He was found to have links with the then pretty much unknown NSA, National Security Agency of the United States. That was such a secret organisation, no one knew about it. And then he had a successor called Philip Klass, Klass, who was a professional debunker, who was known later, or discovered later, to have links with the CIA and the FBI.
I'm really glad you mentioned him, Philip Klass, because he got in touch with the youngest member of the this logging group, and offered him, this was back in 1980 when it was a hell of a lot of money, he offered him $10,000 to just say, oh yeah, we made it all up. Now the guy was in financial difficulties at the time, So if they had made it up, of course he would have accepted the money. It would have been understandable him accepting the money and saying it was all made up. Bear in mind, it was ruining these people's lives as well. If it was true. But he didn't. He stuck to his guns and said, well, no, it happened. And so all credit to him for that. But what does that say about the state if they're employing someone to try and bribe a witness into saying that it was made up? That's appalling. It's
appalling, and I'm surprised he didn't take the bribe if he was in financial difficulty. He offered an amount of money which he could probably have bought a house with in 1980, 10 grand.
Yeah.
I mean, it's before house prices really started taking off over there and over here. That, well, okay, so you've managed to get the youngest one, you've bribed the youngest one with $10,000 to say, yeah, we made it all up. But what does that prove? What does that,
Well, no, that's the point. He didn't manage to bribe it. He still stuck to his guns. And like I said, these are people whose lives have been, like you rightly said early on, they've had to leave their hometown. Some of them have had to make up aliases, to get away from this. It's absolutely appalling.
And to me, that's what's interesting about this story: the extent that they went, the lengths they were prepared to go to, just to debunk this story.
Yeah. Well, we've hit that.
Couldn't have it being believed.
No. We've hit that time when we need to summarise what we think. So it sounds to me like, Neil, like you believe the story.
It's certainly a compelling story. It's a well backed up story. They found physical evidence. They found the spot where he was allegedly hit by the beam of light was irradiated, and the trees that had been felled were growing faster than in the surrounding area. I mean, that's a known technology, isn't it? I mean, I know the Russians used to have radioactive material in their seed laying, their seed planting machines.
You had a similar thing happening with Chernobyl. Shortly after Chernobyl.
Yeah. So, but even back in the 60s, I think the Russians were irradiating their seeds for their crops, make them grow faster. So that's something that's known. But yeah, for me, this is more about how badly the authorities wanted to believe that this wasn't true, or they wanted to debunk this story. They wanted to kill it dead. They wanted to totally discredit any of these witnesses who continued to maintain that version of events.
That was Philip Glass's. Sorry, not Philip Glass. He's a composer. Not to be confused. But yeah, Philip Glass's. That was his MO. Was if he couldn't discredit the story, he'd discredit the person.
Yeah,
he tried it with Stanton Friedman lots of times. Yeah.
So it's an interesting story, and it's an interesting story about how badly certain people really don't want these UFO stories to be believed, and the lengths that they will go to suppress one that actually looks quite credible.
Yes, I totally agree, and it wasn't that long ago they were still trying to discredit. Now you compare that to today, when you've got the Pentagon saying, "Oh yes, those UFO videos that were leaked are real." It's a world of difference.
But I bet Travis Walton still isn't believed.
Oh, there are people out there who don't believe him still.
Yeah, I bet generally in the town of Snowflake, Arizona, it goes too much against the religious beliefs and what their whole belief about the world and nature and everything is based on.
Well, the religion thing's an interesting angle, because even the Vatican have said that they accept extraterrestrial life as a possibility. And I think many religious people will say, well, no, it's not, it's not proof of an absence of God, but rather, just that creation can take many different forms or happen in different places. So yeah, but
there will be other religious sects who will say absolutely no.
Yeah.
The planet Earth was created by God 6,000 years ago. The dinosaurs were a hoax. The stars are just lights in the sky.
Oh yeah, when you've got people still claiming dinosaurs were a hoax, I mean, yeah.
I can imagine that's the kind of thing that Travis Walton is up against and has been for pretty much all his life. You know, he was 21 years old when this happened 46 years ago.
Yeah. I'll be honest, I don't know enough about the Mormon religion to say one way or another how I think people might react. I genuinely just don't know. I'm trying to think if I've ever met any Mormons. Probably, but not.
I most of what I know about the Mormons is through watching South Park.
Right.
And the Book of Mormon, excellent West End show.
Which I've yet to see.
Oh, if you ever get the chance, it is.
I've heard.
Very, very good.
But
not if you're a Mormon.
I'm gonna push you on this though, because you keep diverting away to how society has treated Travis Walton and his friends. Do you believe Travis Walton?
Yes, I do. I certainly believe that Travis Walton believes he's telling the truth, even though he's quite vague about what actually happened to him. He has some sort of vague memories, a dream-like, what he thought was a dream on board this craft. I believe they're telling the truth. They beat the polygraph, even though I don't sit any still by a polygraph. But really, I'm fascinated by the counter response. That this story. It wasn't just that they could say, well, he says he was abducted by a UFO. I can imagine in some parts of the United States they just say, oh well, it sounds like it happens all the time round here. Don't know if it's true or not, but he says it happens. We don't really care either way. But here they were really determined. No, we cannot have this story getting out.
I'm absolutely. Do you know what? I agree with you. I'm absolutely convinced that this event actually happened to him. I can see another possibility. Now I'm going to go a little bit left field here, because we've talked many times about reverse engineering of crashed UFOs, and the government possibly developing their own form of UFOs. So what if that had happened, and yes, they had sort of done this radiation damage to him or whatever, but they faked the whole hospitalization and treatment as if it were aliens before dumping him back.
And then the Robertson panel said, "Oh, we need to get Philip Glass in because he's blabbing a bit." we thought he'd shut up, but actually he's upsetting a few people. Yeah. Let's get Philip Glass to go and give him a hard time.
Maybe. I mean, less than 1 in 10 people actually report their UFO experiences. Less than 1 in 10.
Well, yeah, there was a guy, I think in the movie, that he has a large audience. Says how many people
Stanton Friedman says how many people have seen a UFO, and I think it was 1 in 10 held up their hands. And how many of you have reported it? And 9 of those 10, 9 in every 10 put their hands back down again. And you can see why, if this is the treatment you're going to get. But whether it's an actual UFO with extraterrestrials, or whether it's the government using UFO technology, using it badly and posing as extraterrestrials, either way, I'm absolutely 100% convinced that this is an experience that Travis Walton had.
Yeah, so I'm still surprised by the attitude of this logging crew. That first of all, they went back into town and said there'd been a UFO. They didn't just say, we've been working out in the world's biggest pine forest and one of our crew went missing, we can't find him.
Because they came back and told the truth.
Yeah, but they could have omitted the bit about lights in the sky and all this, if they'd have known how religious their community was. And
that would have raised more questions.
Well, no, they just said, we're working in the forest. He went off to we stopped on the way because he felt sick or he needed to go to the toilet. He went in the forest. He didn't come back, and we couldn't find him. and let's start a search party. That would have. Yeah, I mean, they might still have been suspected of murder and arrested, but it wouldn't have been so immediate. And certainly when the younger guy was offered, a young guy who's got financial difficulties is offered a large amount of money. I mean, not only are your financial problems solved, and maybe you can buy a house and maybe live in comfort for a while, not have to worry too much about working for a while, but actually all this hassle you're getting will go away as well. I'm surprised he didn't jump at that.
Yeah, he'd have been 22 at the time.
He'd have been 22, and he'd have been a property owner.
There we go. But what do you think, listeners, is the Travis Walton case clear and present evidence of alien visitation to the planet, or, to use my favourite phrase, a smoking gun? Or is there something more to it that we've completely missed? Do get in touch via the usual means and let us know. And don't forget to enter that competition as well and give us the name of our grey alien in the artwork. You've got 2 days left to do it. aliensexplored@gmail.com. Next week. Oh, it's a big one next week, isn't it, Neil?
Let me see. Let me check my notes.
Well,
yes, it is. It is. Yes, it is.
Yes, so next week, as we mentioned, it is our 1 year anniversary. So what we're going to be doing, there won't be an episode on the Friday as per normal, on Friday the 30th. What we're actually going to do is we're going to live stream on Saturday the 31st. That's going to be 4 p.m. UK time, 10 a.m. Central time. You can find out more details by going to the description below. That's going to be on our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/stooge_action. Looking forward to that. We're going to be looking back over all the episodes we've done, Neil.
Wow.
Hey! Can't wait for that. So do come and join us on that. We want to hear your thoughts and feelings about what we've done so far on the Twitch chat. Very exciting. And we'll be announcing the winner of the competition to win a t-shirt as well.
Hey.
We'll also be getting in touch with the person by email, so if you can't make it, don't worry. But if you can make it, be there for that.
Absolutely.
In the meantime, keep watching those strange lights through the trees.
And we'll catch you next time.
And we will definitely catch you next time. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Aliens Explored is a Feagle Films production in association with Juicy Falls. Music by Darren Mafucci and editing by Stu Jackson. Find us on Twitter and Facebook by searching Aliens Explored or visit aliensexplored.com.